Press release. Reaction of the CNRC and NGBANDLSTES to the draft strategic partnership agreement between the USA and DR Congo. As the DRC is an occupied country, Congolese resistance fighters urged Donald Trump to work first and foremost for the end of the pitiful regime of Felix Tshisekedi, the Congolese Paytan, rather than for the signature of contestable agreements. Paris, March 7, 2025. Congolese resistance call on Donald Trump not to waste his time with Felix Tshisekedi. For several months now, the Democratic Republic of Congo has been experiencing an upsurge in violence in the eastern part of its territory by armed men in the pay of Kigali, as attested by various reports from UN experts and other informed observers. The disarray of our compatriots in this part of the country is accentuated by the flagrant inability of the Congolese government to deal with this threat. With their backs to the wall, Felix Tshisekedi and his collaborators are now rushing to U.S. President Donald Trump to negotiate a strategic partnership agreement with the United States in order to obtain their protection in exchange for minerals from the DRC. The Conseil National de la Resistance Congolaise, CNRC, and NGBANDLSTES would like to draw everyone's attention to the unreliability of these unscrupulous individuals, their betrayal of their homeland, and their illegitimacy to commit the Democratic Republic of Congo in any field whatsoever. Felix Tshisekedi's illegitimacy confirmed. Public confessions by Paul Kagame and Corneille Nangaa give reason to Congolese resistance fighters. The CNRC and NGBANDLSTES draw everyone's attention, especially the U.S. administration's, to the repeated confessions by Corneille Nangaa and Paul Kagame, which confirm what the majority of Congolese have been denouncing since 2018/2019, namely the illegitimacy of Felix Tshisekedi, who reached the supreme magistracy through fraud and dishonest arrangements between various players. When these public confessions, made repeatedly, come from Corneille Nangaa as president of the Independent Electoral Commission and Paul Kagame, president of the African Union at the time of the events, they are not insignificant. We emphasize that their words are an addition not only to those of many Congolese on this same subject and with evidence, but also to the words in May 2019 of Mr. Eliot Engel, chairman of the U.S. Committee on Foreign Affairs in the House of Representatives, cf. video https://uder.be/p2vyWx 74 ITC $SI = 3_UX upveravislkf at 1 minute 59 seconds. Every American can undoubtedly understand that any truly serious American court could rule in favor of Congolese seeking to challenge the legitimacy of Felix Tshisekedi, the Congolese Paytan, and his inability to commit the Democratic Republic of Congo to any agreement. Paul Kagame would have been well advised to be one of the first to remember this before signing agreements with this forger and fraudster or calling for talks and the like with Felix Tshisekedi. We must also add to this, as demonstrated in part by the elements gathered in the video above, the long list of facts accumulated by Congolese resistance fighters, already under the leadership of Mr. Honoré Nganda, intelligence officer and father of the Congolese resistance, and which prove that following his imposture and multiple frauds, Joseph Kabila had no standing to commit the Democratic Republic of Congo either. We'll come back to this later. Events are proving the late Honoré Nganda and the Congolese resistance fighters, CNRC/NGBANDLSTES, right, as they have remained faithful to his reading of the political situation in the DRC, an occupied country and victim of the compromise of Felix Tshisekedi, the Congolese Paytan, ally of Kagame and Kabila. Indeed, despite the relative and belated diplomatic support that the Democratic Republic of the Congo is currently enjoying, it has to be said that the Congolese government is only conspicuous by its inability to regain ground in the East primarily for internal reasons. The hideous picture, which they are trying to camouflage, of their own pitiful management of the Congolese response, or rather their own sabotage of our defense, speaks volumes about their complicity with our enemies. 1. While we are at war, Congolese soldiers have been destitute for years, living in precarious conditions, while Felix Tshisekedi and his entourage shamelessly enrich themselves at the expense of Congolese state coffers. In the midst of war, the meager salaries of our soldiers at the front are not only paid late, but embezzled on several occasions, and the perpetrators of these reprehensible acts go unpunished. 2. In the field, our soldiers have regularly been betrayed by their own hierarchy, many of whose senior officers are either Congolese collaborators in the service of Kigali or Rwandans, ex-RPA or RPF, previously appointed by Joseph Kabila, Rwanda's Trojan horse, or even by Felix Tshisekedi himself. 3. Despite being in possession of several lists of Rwandan infiltrators lurking within our security services, army, police, intelligence services, parliament, government, etc., revealed by Mr. Honoré Nganda, or given to him by his own services or other friendly services, not only did Felix Tshisekedi and his government keep them in post and continue to pay them, but he also appointed others to strategic positions, such as military intelligence, to the head of his cabinet within the government, etc. 4. Still in full contradiction, cowardly, and entangled by its allegiance to Joseph Kabila and Rwanda, the Congolese government sentenced to death Corneille Nangaa, the head of the AFC/M23 militia, and confiscated his property. But, paradoxically, Joseph Kabila, his leader, remains unpunished despite all the criminal acts he has committed in the DRC, and despite the fact that Felix Tshisekedi himself, rightly, accuses him of being the real instigator of this militia sponsored by Paul Kagame. Worse still, for years this irresponsible government has been paying this criminal a monthly salary of several $100,000. Mr. Honoré Nganda's networks inside and outside the country have informed us of the serious revelations made by his sister, Janet Kabila, equally complicit, a few months ago in Kinshasa. She made a damning confession against Joseph Kabila. But all these criminals are still at large, protected by Felix Tshisekedi and Constant Mutamba, a so-called Minister of Justice, who admires Joseph Kabila and considers him his mentor. We have already broadcast videos of his scandalous remarks. 5. Furthermore, Felix Tshisekedi, who is crying out for international sanctions against Kigali, has never ceased to protect Rwanda's interests in the DRC, not to mention those of Uganda. While we are at war with these two countries, which are killing and pillaging on our territory, and while their armies have been singled out by the UN mapping report and others, Felix Tshisekedi has refused to close the border with these aggressor countries of the DRC. He preferred to preserve their economic interests and continue to develop trade relations with these executioners of the Congolese people. 6. Thanks to this laxity, Rwanda has become the leading exporter of strategic minerals such as coltan, which it plunders in the DRC because it has none in its subsoil, as Mr. Herman Cohen, former U.S. Undersecretary of State, and the European Union Ambassador to the DRC, Mr. Berlanga Martinez, Nicola, have publicly pointed out. The latter declared in May 2024 that 80% of the minerals exported by Rwanda are of Congolese origin. 7. Worse still, it is now common knowledge that since Felix Tshisekedi's accession to power, the Tshisekedi family has itself exploited several Congolese mines, and has therefore joined forces with all those who export these blood minerals, spitting on the Congolese people. Tshisekedi's own involvement in the trafficking of our minerals makes it easy to understand why he opposes the closure of our borders. 8. Finally, in complicity with the corrupt and equally collaborationist Congolese parliament, which covers up his acts of high treason, Félix Tshisekedi has introduced, without a mandate from the Congolese people, the DR Congo into the EAC, East African Community, a group of countries allied to Kigali and Kampala. 9. This list of facts proving the treachery of Félix Tshisekedi and his government is unfortunately not exhaustive, and should prompt each of their interlocutors to exercise considerable reservations. In conclusion, it is above all under the growing pressure of the increasingly vigilant Congolese, who are out of breath and entangled in their compromises with Joseph Kabila and Paul Kagame, that Félix Tshisekedi and his supporters have decided to obtain the support of the United States, not to save the DRC and the Congolese people, whom they despise, but above all to save their moribund power. Honoré Nganda's long awakening process is bearing fruit. After more than 20 years, like a tsunami that nothing can stop, it is Honoré Nganda's discourse that we are carrying that continues to gain ground among the Congolese people. Félix Tshisekedi and his government, transformed into the musicians of the Titanic, whose compromise and mediocrity are laid bare, arouse nothing but disgust. For the members of the Congolese resistance who fought alongside the late Mr. Honoré Nganda, it is clear that the fight we have been waging since at least 2005 for the total liberation of our country, the DRC, has reached a decisive turning point. The deception that enabled Félix Tshisekedi, the Congolese Paytan, and the Rwandan-Ugandan occupiers to seize control of our institutions in order to accelerate the process of occupation and balkanization of our country has now been exposed, sounding the death knell for this band of thugs. It's up to everyone to read the signs of the times and to be on the right side of history. Paris, March 7, 2025. For the Conseil National de la Résistance Congolaise, CNRC, and NGBANDLSTES, Candido Kake, responsible for the strategic management of the CNRC, collaborator of Mr. Honoré Nganda from November 2005 to March 2021, Vice President of Aparico/RC, www.resistancecongolese.com.